Lunchbox from Wife. Written by Fairycrest. Read by Arashi. Acting Grand Sage Alhaitham has always been indifferent. The man has always had this unapproachable disposition, even when he was still a scribe. When the man became the acting Grand Sage, however, his cold demeanor increased, maybe due to the authority he held. Being the new Grand Sage, Alhaitham was now cramped with loads of work, from cleaning up Azar's stupidity to fixing it. It didn't pose as a surprise to the staff and students of the academia when the former Grand Scribe would sigh at their papers with a menacing glare, since the man was already exhausted from the non-stop amount of work for a week now. The man's office has this dark air that suffocates you, even just by passing by it. This has been going on for days, and everyone is on edge. However, today is the day it'll change. Today, the Traveler and Paimon walked into the building with a teal handbag in Traveler's hand. The two stopped in front of the dead-aired office and greeted the Grand Sage's assistant. "Hello," Aether greeted the man. "We came with the delivery for Alhaitham." The cheerful man gestured to the bag with a bright smile. The people walking in the halls halt in place, curious to know what's going on. Unfortunately, the Grand Sage is still busy at the moment," the assistant stated, preventing the two from moving forward. "But this is very important," Aether insisted. "Why don't you leave it here and I'll give it to him when he's not busy anymore?" suggested the secretary. But the two only shook their head.
"But his wife said to give it to Alhaitham directly."
As the sound of the word wife came out of Paimon's mouth, the door to the office flung open, and the Grand Sage walked out, eyes on the Traveler and his companion. "Oh, there you are," the blonde adventurer beamed, as he stretched out his arms, his hands clutching a teal handbag. "Your wife told us to deliver this since he's going to be late for work and couldn't deliver the item himself. He told us to tell you that he hopes you'll take a break and have a nice meal." The dark mare instantly dissipates, and although there was no change in the former scribe's aloof face, the air around him seemed to mellow out, and almost everyone could see the flowers float away from the Grand Sage's head. "Thank you." He received the bag as gently as he could, took a peek of its contents. "Do you have somewhere else to go afterwards?" Aether nodded his head eagerly. "Yep, I have to go now. I just came to deliver your lunch." The blonde Traveler left the building, and the Grand Sage looked fondly at the bag before closing the door to his office. And finally, the students and staff who heard the commotion took this as an opportunity to turn their heads to look at the office door with wide eyes and mouths agape. "The Grand Sage is married? Since when? Forget that part. Someone actually married their stone-like sage? What kind of saint is that person?" As the students and staff processed the events that just happened, inside the office, Alhaitham placed the bag gently on the table and shoved his hand in, furrowing his brows as his hand pulled out a folded piece of paper. Unfolding the sheet, the man was greeted with a set of instructions. "Pull out the canteen first." That was what the first phrase said, and Alhaitham didn't say anything but comply, a bit seeing no reason to actually do such a thing. Following his wife's instructions could actually lead him to something. "Now, pull out the lunchbox and place the bag aside for now." That was the last thing written on the paper, and so the man shoved the paper back into the bag and did exactly as instructed, by pulling out a red, wooden box wrapped in a white, clean cloth. Alhaitham is not a man that gets overwhelmed by emotions quickly, but unwrapping the cloth surely sparked some excitement in him. As the now unwrapped cloth revealed the seal of the wooden box, the scribe grabbed it as gently as he could, a bit hesitant because he might damage the contents of the small rectangular box. When the lid was off, Alhaitham couldn't help himself but let out a small gasp, and a smile made its way to his lips. Each side of the rectangular box has a proportioner. On the top left place, there were sliced apples in the shape of a bunny. The lower left, there were sunsettias, sliced like a star. The top right was thinly sliced meat, rolled into a rose, and the lower right, spices, placed in a small bottle that can fit the small compartment of the lunchbox. Really, the lunchbox screamed aesthetic, one that Alhaitham's wife greatly prided himself of. What made this lunchbox so special, though, was what food was placed at the center of the box. 2 onigiris, big enough to be the size of his wife's palm. The left one was decorated with dried naku seagrass, the green ocean grass forming a small circle, a thin line, and frowning slanted lines, adorned with gray sesame, that formed into bangs. Alhaitham smiled at the onigiri that copied the usual frown on his face, and his eyes landed on the other character rice ball. He can feel his stress alleviate as he looked at the sour plum grin and sour plum ruby hues, along with the mustard yellow, shaped as his wife's hair. The onigiri in the shape of his wife was smiling brightly at him, like he usually does at home, and Alhaitham can already feel himself wanting to go home. With a sigh, the man grabs a piece of the bunny apple, munching on it and appreciating the sweetness of it. Without even noticing, the man emptied the top left compartment and paused when seeing a sealed paper, probably to keep it from getting wet. The man grabbed the paper, sealed in thin cling wrap, and read, "I knew you'd eat this first." The man smiled. He can hear his wife's voice in his head as he read the next one. "Eat the rose meat next." The small emoji was so like him, is what Alhaitham thought, as he munched on the salty, rose-shaped meat, eating the 2 pieces, and was once again greeted by another letter. "You can eat the sunsettias now. If it's too sweet for you, there's a bottle of squeezed lime, okay?" It was really sweet. Not the sunsettias, but all the effort his wife is doing right now. He ate the sunsettias without the lime this time, not minding its taste as excitement overcame him, excited to see another note. And he did see one. "Don't hesitate to eat them. And no, you can't keep the onigiri meat away. It'll rot, so eat it now." Alhaitham, of course, ate the onigiri that looks a lot like him. Too similar to him, honestly. Damn his creative wife. The taste was amazing, too. Not just the presentation. The sesame balanced out the tuna flakes inside the rice ball and eased out the saltiness of the seagrass. Once he was done eating his face, his eyes fell to the one that looked like his wife. He looked at it for a while, a long while, before finally sighing and grabbing it, closing his eyes as he shoved the rice ball into his mouth, not wanting to see the rice ball in a damaged state. He was glad his wife prepared a bottle of water for him that turned out to be lemonade, and he felt a bit better after gulping down nearly half of the lemon juice. With a sigh, Alhaitham grabbed the paper underneath the 2 rice balls and read, "See? It wasn't so hard." "It was, wife," thought the grand sage. "As a reward, you can now grab the last item in the bag." Alhaitham eyed the bag, and as quickly as he could, grabbed the item inside, and seeing it with his eyes, he declared, "I'm going home early today." The small, clear bag, wrapped cutely with a red ribbon, was housing 5 medium-sized cookies, all drawing the face of his wife, in all different expressions. There was a sad one, a happy one, an angry one, a surprised one, and one that shaped his hand with a heart. There was a note on the end of the ribbon that seals the bag. "Sweets help when you're stressed. I hope this one helps. I love you." The people outside the office all stopped to look at the atmosphere of the now raining flowers feeling of the room. The dark atmosphere long gone, and an excessive feeling of happiness was inside the room. Everyone nearly bowed at the Grand Sage's mysterious wife. A silent prayer of thank yous and all surrounds them. Alhaitham unlocks the door to his house. The Grand Sage finished all of his work at an alarming speed, and made no mistake whatsoever, too. The stress from the entire week long gone, and the man went home with a light step. He walked in, and was greeted by his wife sleeping on one of their couches, pencil in hand, as his face was pressed on an unfinished project. "There," Alhaitham called out, placing the teal tote bag on the other couch as he crouched down to the sleeping man. "Kaveh, love, I'm home." Kaveh groaned in response as the man's lips landed on his forehead. He didn't wake up, probably still exhausted from his project. Alhaitham gently shifts the man, gently cradling him in his arms and lifting him up, careful not to cause a disturbance to the architect's sleep. He carried the man to their room, placing him gently on the sheets and wrapping his arms around him, as Alhaitham himself found the warmth of his wife lull him to a slumber. He took one look at the sleeping man in his arms once again, before gently placing his lips on top of his, before pulling back, closing his eyes, and fell asleep to the sound of his wife's breathing.